Bob Mueller clearly rattling Trump, who made some actual news when he spoke to reporters today, revealing for the first time that after months of the negotiations, which you've certainly heard of by now, Donald Trump is taking Mueller's questions on collusion, saying he's now written up his answers to Mueller and stressing he did it all by himself.
My lawyers aren't working on that. I'm working on that. I write the answers. My lawyers don't write answers. I write answers. I was asked a series of questions. I've answered them very easily. Very easily. I'm sure they're tricked up because, you know, they like to catch people.
A president who was sued more than any president in history, claiming he's not relying on his lawyers for answering the questions in a legal case. I'll just tell you, Donald Trump, way too experienced in courtrooms and deposition rooms to make that mistake. So that particular claim does sound false. But with or without lawyers, Trump committing his collusion defense to writing is an important development. And so tonight, we know that was the backdrop for Trump's recent early morning tweet storm about this probe, where he made the potentially self-incriminating boast that he has knowledge of the inner workings of Mueller's activities and alleging, of course without evidence, that the prosecutors scream and shout and threaten people, comments he explained in a recent interview.
On Twitter yesterday, seemed a bit agitated about what you might be perceiving the Mueller investigation.
No, I'm not agitated. It's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax. There was no collusion.
But did anything trigger that set of tweets?
No, not at all. No, I'm very happy.
But for months until yesterday, Trump had barely mentioned Mueller. These new complaints come as Paul Manafort asked for more time to complete a status report that was actually due today, and confirming they're still meeting there, Manafort and his team, and cooperating and ready to fork over more details after Thanksgiving. Just like guilty Trump aide Rick Gates is still cooperating, as is Trump's guilty former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who reporters actually spotted on his way to Washington to meet with Mueller's team.
Mr. Cohen, what brings you to Washington, D.C. today?
Mr. Cohen, you meeting with Mr. Mueller?
Mr. Cohen, I joined the special counsel's office. Mr. Cohen, how's your train ride?
Train was great.
All those threads have fed a deep anxiety in the White House that Mueller is about to make another move. And we have quite a panel to break this all down. Former Watergate Special Prosecutor Nick Ackerman, former counsel to the mayor of New York City, Maya Wiley, and former Trump advisor Sam Nunberg, who's appeared directly before Bob Mueller's grand jury. And you're here as a free man, partly thanks to Maya Wiley.
That is right.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
When you look at this, and you're the only person in this room who's actually been inside with those prosecutors, what do you glean from these developments and the way these folks, some of whom you used to work with, are cooperating?
I think that in terms of the president, perhaps, and I can't speak on behalf of him, and I have to say this disclaimer, I've had no communication with their lawyers or with him concerning anything like this, that it was no coincidence to me that they are working on these written responses after the results of the midterms. I'm not so sure, perhaps, that they would have given in any answers, because even if you read the recent book, The Apprentice, by the Washington Post reporter, I can't remember his name, one of the issues in terms of the original lawyer leaving Dowd was that he wanted to hand in a lot of written responses, and Jay and the president had argued against
You're talking about the Woodward reporting in Fear?
No, there's a different book, The Apprentice, by Washington Post reporter.
The Miller book.
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, well, and I believe both those books talk about the fact that, to your point, that Dowd, as a criminal defense strategy, didn't want Trump giving up anything. He didn't think he would tell the truth in any form.
Yes, but particularly with the Miller book, what they said was that Dowd, that there was I believe there was an interview that was scheduled. It was going to be at Camp David. It was then canceled, and that Dowd, unbeknownst to Rudy and Jay, or if Rudy was involved then, but Jay Sekulow, who I used to work for him, so I call him Jay, but Jay Sekulow, he was preparing responses to the 19 or so questions that they had, and they didn't think it was a good idea because they didn't want to have the president give in any more written responses.
Nick, that goes to something else that Donald Trump said in his little appearance today, where he sort of made light of what he views as attempts to trick people into perjuring themselves. Take a look.
They like to catch people, gee, you know, was the weather sunny or was it rainy? He said it may have been a good day. It was rainy, therefore he told a lie. He perjured himself. Okay, so you have to always be careful when you answer questions with people that probably have bad intentions.
Are written questions in this forum an issue for him for perjury or for the underlying collusion question?
Well, first of all, these written questions are written, the responses are done by lawyers. Donald Trump just basically signed off on these things.
That was my impression.
Yeah, no decent lawyer would ever let him sit there and come up with his own answers because the odds are he would lie. You don't trap somebody in perjury. If they intentionally lie about something material, not about the weather, not about whether it's raining outside, but it has to do with the substance of the investigation and whether or not the Trump campaign conspired with the Russian government to help the Trump campaign win the election. That's the issue. So it's not about whether it was raining. It's not about some minor issue that's not material to the Mueller investigation. And someone doesn't go in and just trap themselves in perjury. You don't get trapped into lying. You either tell the truth or you lie.
And in that clip there, we saw Mile Wiley. We saw Donald Trump who said, of course it's me. I don't rely on my lawyers. Nick, as a lawyer, is dubious about that, as am I. We'll get your view. But I want to play another Donald Trump in another legal litigation setting who was all about relying on his lawyers. Take a look.
What did you do prior to signing this statement to assure yourself that you were accurately making the representation to the bank that you were entitled to draw down those funds?
I asked my lawyers. This one right here. I don't know that. I just don't know. You'd have to ask the lawyers about that.
Yeah, you have to ask the lawyers. That just says it all. He is a person who understands that if you're going to make sure you do not get yourself into legal trouble, then you have your lawyers help you. Now, the lawyers can't make up the facts unless they as well want to be in legal trouble, right?
So let's law school it a little bit.
Okay.
What would be the hypothetical facts that you need? For example, if the question was, did anyone in the senior management of the campaign talk to you about stolen Russian information before it became public?
Right.
How does the lawyer answer that question in the right way if they don't know the facts?
Well, they can't. They have to get the facts. This is the point. I mean, he is submitting written questions, and I think this is why, unlike his answer and the suggestion, I did it and it was so easy, it's not so easy. I mean, there are two issues. Did he receive information, what kind of information, and what did he understand about the source of that information, right? So, in other words, someone could say, oh, I heard that there were emails on Hillary Clinton. I was told there were emails on Hillary Clinton. I wasn't told where they came from. Mm-hmm. That's a very different answer than, yes, Paul Manafort told me, or Roger Stone told me, that there were emails that, Russians had hacked from Hillary Clinton or the DNC, and that they were going to be. So those are very different facts, right, in terms of legal liability. So the question that lawyers have to go through is to talk to their client about. They also have to go through the documents, by the way. They're going to go through his emails. They're going to look at whatever they think the prosecutors have, so that they also understand whether or not an answer looks or appears inconsistent with some documentation.
Right. And there's a Republican official, Nick, who was talking to reporters this week, saying you can see in Trump's body language all this week there's something troubling him. It led him to believe the walls are closing in. They've been notified by counsel if some action's about to happen. Folks are preparing for the worst. If you think Roger Stone is a rogue operative who didn't do anything wrong, or you weren't in touch with him and he's about to be indicted, that may not concern you. If, however, you think that you were talking to him on the regs about all kinds of stuff, that might be exactly the kind of thing that would make you nervous.
And it's not just Roger Stone. It's a whole panoply of people that were involved in the campaign, that were connected with Stone, that were connected with the president. I mean, Roger Stone was, sure Sam known, was very closely connected to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've known each other for eons. It was Roger Stone who encouraged Trump to run for president. Roger Stone has been a basic fixture in New York politics for a long time.
And when you were before the grand jury, they were asking you about Roger Stone.
Yeah, well, one of the first questions I got from the special prosecutor was, how often did they communicate? And my answer was, I don't think they communicated often in October because the president was on the campaign trail. With that said, I also think...
So you gave them what you say is your accurate understanding of the information, but you weren't always with them.
Correct. And with that said, also, as we saw with the Steve Bannon emails where Roger starts attacking me, I had nothing to do with it, but in that Haberman story, Roger was almost persona non grata once Paul was out in terms of the upper management of the campaign. With that said, he could have had direct access. But I just wanted to bring up another point, though. Besides the conspiracy or the collusion in terms of the president's responses, what he's also doing here, and you know this from your Watergate experience, is on the obstruction. It is going to be harder for Nadler and the Judiciary Committee to argue on obstruction that he has obstructed this case. He has handed over documents. He has never fired anyone. He has cooperated.
Did you just say Donald Trump has never fired anyone?
Well, you're talking, yes.
and you know that's not true. I mean, he fired James Comey and then put in the letter, you cleared me of wrongdoing 3 times. He linked it in the letter.
I'm talking about Mueller. With Mueller. He's never fired.
He's never fired Bob Mueller. But the New York Times reported he attempted to fire Mueller, and it was only Don McGahn who interceded there.
True, but he didn't.
Let me ask you about one more thing before we go, and I'm glad we cleared up that little item of recent history. This is more on the politics side, and you know a lot of these folks. You're familiar with the term talking trash.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the notion of hot trash, trash so hot that it's on fire. I'm referring, of course, to a dumpster fire and a critic of the administration who's also married into the administration. We call that married to the game. George Conway, who's married to Kellyanne Conway, and here's what he said that's making some waves.
I'm watching this thing, and, you know, it's like the administration is like a show in a dumpster fire. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't know. And I realized, you know, this guy's going to be at war with the Justice Department.
What do you make of that kind of criticism? Is it fair, and the Kellyanne Conway of it all?
Well, in terms of Kellyanne Conway, I've always said I didn't want to talk about this, but my interpretation has been that George Conway was more than happy to become Solicitor General. Let's remember that. I don't know the reason why he withdrew his nomination, but what I do know is once he left Wachtell, he wasn't a partner anymore. He was of counsel. This cost him millions and millions of dollars, and I always thought that was one of his reasons.
And by the way, this is we're getting into the details. This person who's held himself out as Mr. Resistance, who happens to be married to Kellyanne Conway and happens to have been a longstanding Republican, you think there's just a personal bitterness?
Yes.
I don't buy it. I don't buy its personal bitterness. I don't think you, as an attorney, go and burn bridges like that where your wife is eating. You know, you usually don't mess with where you eat unless you really believe what you're saying. If you think about some of his op-ed on the constitutionality of appointing Whitaker, I mean, those are very, very, very big steps to take just because you're mad, and he did withdraw. But I do want to go back to one other point quickly, which is, you know, Roger, Trump was talking about, just going back to the issue of conspiracy, he was talking about emails before October. I mean, he was inviting Russians in July. So I'm assuming that you got asked questions about communications between Roger Stone and Trump before that.
Yes. Well, look, they wanted to know why was Roger fired? Was Roger in fact fired? They wanted to know how often did they communicate. They wanted what was his involvement with getting Paul Manafort hired? What was Roger's relationship with the campaign? What did he tell you? Look, Roger had a lot of problems with the campaign in terms of personal grievances he had in terms of complaining to me about the way he was treated at the convention, things like that.
So, but let's remember, this is the important point that Sam just made. We know that Mueller has asked, and Paul Manafort's attorneys have asked for more time for their status report to the court, and we know that he was in fact helped into the position of chairman of the campaign by Roger Stone.
I got to get in some Georgia news, so real quick, Nick.
But anyway, I mean, the idea that Sam is acknowledging the question was whether or not Roger Stone was really fired from the campaign is really critical, because what it looks like is that was a ruse for him to go underground and be in a spot where he had plausible deniability about anything he did that wouldn't then be related to the campaign.
Right, and in fairness, I don't know that the public facts go that far, but they certainly support. But they certainly support some exposure for the idea that Donald Trump keeps in touch with people long after they leave the official campaign or government payroll. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.